The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin of Gosselin and Martin Associates. As always, thank you for clicking on this video. Today's episode is a review of our Healthcare Facilities Management Survey that we conducted this past fall. This is the third year in a row we've done one. Did one 2022, 2023. And so we've been talking about the results of that. So I want to share those with you. What I'm going to do now is share my screen, bring up some of those results. Here we go. So these are the results. We had over 160 respondents, so I was really happy with that that turnout. Anybody who replied and took part, thank you so much in advance. We are conducting some interviews now with folks who said that we could contact them, and those episodes where we talk to people who filled out the survey, they'll be coming up in the new year, 2024. Man, that's hard to believe, huh? 2024. So I wanted to share some select results with you, and we will go over those. Now, start out, how long have you worked in healthcare facilities management? On the left side of the screen, my left hand, we have 2022 and 2023. So 2022 here, 2023 here. And as you might expect, from left to right, 0 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and then 21 to 25 plus. Of our respondents in 2022, 61% were 21 to 25 years. This year, down to 55%. But this year, the 16 to 20 ranks rose by a couple of points, and the 11 to 15 years rose. So everything rose. Everything went up. Didn't have anybody from 0 to 5 years who responded this year. So that's interesting to me. So if you are 0 to 5 years, let's get on that for next year. So anyways, you can see, though, their trend is for people who have worked in healthcare facilities management for a long time. What are the significant issues facing healthcare facilities management? And again, we have our 2022 over here and our 2023. As was the case last year, staff shortages, trades shortages leads 86%. Both years said that. So that was interesting. Salaries, 68% 2022, 64% this year. Burnout, a significant rise, 42% in 2022, 62% in 2023. So that's a 20% rise. Again, I'm not surprised by that, and I'm sure you're not either. Because in some ways, it almost seems like a continuation from the COVID years, from 2020 to 2023, relative to some of the issues. I mean, if you're thinking trade shortages, inadequate salaries, yeah, that's going to lead to burnout. Institutional support, we added it this year. 50% of people said institutional support. That's kind of a high number. At least I think so. And you have your retirements. And the pace of change, that pace of change stayed pretty consistent, 39% last year, 2022, 34% this year. But I guess, you look at these top three issues, right? They pretty much the same from last year, with burnout going out. And so that is significant. I'm looking at, not everybody wants to have their responses go public. And so I'm just kind of looking through what some of you had written relative to, the issues facing it. And again, overall burnout from COVID pandemic. What we're seeing in the written word is really mirroring. It's an interesting word. Mirroring what we see over in the results. Not enough capital, infrastructure needs, regulatory changes. An interesting one to me, and it was a couple of it written, but this one, the wording stood out. The lack of integrity in leadership roles, I thought was interesting. too. I mean, hey, C-level roles, leadership roles, they're turning over too. And so I think, what we're experiencing in healthcare facilities management isn't necessarily unique to healthcare facilities management. And so I just thought that was an interesting. We have supply chain security, lead times. So I think that, you're all feeling some of the same things. Just trying to look through, so I'm sorry for dead air. I know you're never supposed to have dead air, but just looking through what people are writing. Here was an interesting one. Malaise, hard to find people who care about anything. I don't know if that's fair. Now listen, I don't know who you are who wrote that, and I probably shouldn't counter you, but at least from the experience of people we deal with, people care. Sometimes people care too much. And so we definitely see that. Corporate financial issues, funding, it's all very, very similar. Facilities is the catch-all for most healthcare organizations, is becoming more of a catch-all. Interior finishes, furniture selection, space planning. These are additional opportunities. These are additional tasks that take time away from what we're supposed to be dealing with. Senior leadership struggling to find solutions. So, there were a variety of issues, but again, a lot of commonality with that. So significant issues facing healthcare facilities management: trades, salary, burnout. We've talked a lot about salary. I saw that last week. So the last week of November, first week of December, ASHI came out with a salary survey, and salaries are definitely going up. I think that we've said it before, I'll say it again, relative to the salary issue. Hospitals do their salary surveys, and a weakness in the salary survey, and Steve Call said this on one of the episodes we do, typically they're just looking at other, they're comparing themselves to other hospitals, and these days it's just not a good comparison. You need to be comparing yourself to the other competitors, the other sharks that are circling out there. And what do we do for the staff shortages in the trades? Well, we're trying to fill that pipeline here at the Healthcare Facilities Network, but it really does take an integrated effort, and it's a multi-year effort too. It won't happen overnight. So those are the issues facing healthcare facilities management. Are you considering retirement? Last year, 44% said yes. This year, 57% said they are considering retirement. So a significant rise, right? From one year to the other, up 13%. And I think that, we saw in our previous slide how many years of people have been working in healthcare facilities management. That figure rose from last year, and resultingly, are you considering retirement? Rose as well. I'm not going to really go into too much on that. I mean, we talk about that a lot. This is Peter Martin. If you or your organization is interested in advertising or partnering with the Healthcare Facilities Network, including sponsoring content, then please email me using the barcode in the lower right of your screen. From the trades level to the vice president level, from planning, design, construction, project management, compliance, safety, and security, the Healthcare Facilities Network reaches FM people where FM people are. Decarb and sustainability. One of the questions on that survey, this was kind of the lead into it. I'll just reiterate it here. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says that health systems should set targets to reduce their emissions by half by 2030, compared with a baseline from 2008, and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So the 2050 date is so far out there that we really only wanted to ask about the 2030 date. How concerned are you about your organization's ability to meet the suggested standards? So what did people say? Are you concerned about meeting the 2030 goals? 41% of respondents said they are very concerned. 35% said they are concerned. So roughly 76% of the respondents to this survey said they are concerned. 11% don't think about it. 9%, so 9% of the respondents said they will meet it by 2030. So not a huge number. Nobody responded to they will have departed by 2030. I thought in some instances that will have departed would go hand in hand with the retirements. So what did people say about decarb and sustainability? One of the themes in there was unfunded mandates, and that is somewhat of a concern. We talked about this a little bit in the wake of the ASHI annual, because ASHI did a number of presentations on sustainability, decarbonization, just to support people, right? People need support to achieve these goals. But a couple of folks just talked about, again, it's another one of those unfunded mandates that we're going to need to achieve. Looking for some of the other responses to that, people are doing different things. Some folks were afraid of, how do we define, how do we reduce with our infrastructure, which is aging. We have limited capital. So how do we fit this onto all of those ongoing operational issues? And that seemed to be one of the more common responses. If you want a little bit more information on decarbonization and sustainability, again, ASHI has a ton of information out there. We also did on the Healthcare Facilities Network. If you go back through our archives, we had Andy Wumavova on from Trinity Healthcare. Andy is spearheading their efforts there, and Andy is also very involved on the national scale. So if you want a little more information, did a 2-part episode with Andy, which I thought was pretty enlightening. So that was a really strong. If you want more info, then you can find it there. It seems like folks are taking advantage of their low-hanging fruit opportunities to reach sustainability. LED light upgrades, steam traps, et cetera. But I think long-term, there's definitely concern into it. 6 years or 2030 will be here really in the blink of an eye. It's not that long. And if you think of, again, unfunded mandate on top of staff shortages, on top of PM work and work order work, you can see why burnout increases, especially if you feel like your organization isn't supportive of you. We didn't have, in the efforts. As I look through the responses, there was not people claiming that they weren't supported by the organization, but most definitely the financial stresses and, where does this rank among our capital needs was definitely cited by a number of people. So decarbonization and sustainability is certainly not going away as an issue. And in fact, as we get closer to 2030, I would imagine it only increases. Have these efforts impacted your department, your facilities department? 38% said yes, 61% said no. Because again, remember, while we have a facilities focus on this issue, it's broader than the facilities. It's really your whole system and extends into and impacts the subcontractors you use, the vendors that you use. That's why, like I said, if you haven't had a lot of information for it, I would recommend the episode we did with Andy Wumavova, where you just kind of start to look into it. It's a broad issue, and it's going to take time to get up to speed. This one from our recruiting arm was an interesting question to me. What do you consider a minimum length of stay with an employer before seeking a new role? So a minimum length of stay. And the reason we asked this is because, frankly, people are transitioning after a year or two. And again, I'm sure you see this, right? You see this in your organization. So minimum length of stay, 2% said 0 to 1 years. 28% said 1 to 3. That's a big number, I think, right? 28% 1 to 3. 47% said 3 to 5 years. So the majority say 3 to 5 years. I would guess that these folks are older in their responses, maybe my age old, so that I don't insult anybody. But 9% said 5 to 7 years, and 11% said 7 to plus. Listen, the reason we asked this question, as I said, is because it's a concern that folks are leaving more quickly. We do, and we've done our healthcare facilities toolbox presentation, and one of the slides in there just talks about not lengths of stay, but how long before you move up the career ladder. And I used to tell people, you need to be at your position at least minimum 3 years before you even think of moving on. Better 4 to 5 years before you think of moving on. That is completely out the window. And I think that to a certain extent, you see that reflected there, because I would have to guess that 47% is probably in the 3 year. So folks are moving more quickly. There's a number of reasons, for doing so. Some people, we tie it back to that salary, right? Where salaries are an issue. So sometimes the only way that you can get a bump in your salary, because again, organizations are hamstrung too in certain ways. I mean, there's only so much money available, and organizations have these, salary ranges where they want to put people in. Some people they could be 30 to 40K between your low point and your high point. And some folks who have been at organizations for a while, they figure, and I've talked to some of you before, say the only way I could get a bump is to go out and play the market. And that's happening. So there's just a number of issues at play with relative to length of stay. I've said this a number of times too. You'll find that the younger generations, and we were talking about this in the class we did just the other day, they're less apt to stay long term if they envision that an organization doesn't have it together. So that is definitely a factor too. So I think there are a number of factors in play that have led to this length of stay, but this was an interesting question that I was interested to see the response to. And you'll see just about 75% of the respondents, actually 77. Wow, math was never my strong suit. But 77% of respondents say before 5 years is appropriate. I remember, and I've said this story before, I was working with an HR person, and they said to me, we put a resume in front of them, and the person had been in the role for, I think it was 11 years. And the HR person had said, what's wrong with this person? Why have they been there so long? And so, you think about just the sea change, where before, people were staying 15 years, you want to have that longevity. And now folks are saying, why have you been there for so long? So as in most things relative to these days, I look at everything on a case-by-case basis. Who are you? What have you achieved? What are you going for? It's really hard now. And it's one of the things when we work with organizations, try to talk to them about it. It's difficult to have stringent rules that you must abide by. I think, and I say that as a person who, I believe in rule, and I believe in process, and I believe in controlling things to the extent you can. But given today's environment, you need to be flexible. And if you're not flexible, you're probably going to find yourself in a little bit of trouble from an organizational perspective, because there are no perfect candidates. There should be no, from my perspective, black and white rules. Everything should be on an individual basis. You got to be comfortable in the gray areas these days. You have to be, because everything's gray. Has your department had difficulties filling an open role in the past year? 86% said yes. I would have thought that might have been 90, but a lot of difficulty in filling open roles in the past year. The Florida healthcare engineers, where we were just recently, a lot of the talk was in the trades, and everybody talks about Florida and people are moving down there, and maybe it's easier to fill roles, but in Florida, they're also competing from a facilities perspective against all those hotels, against Disney, and against the hospitality industry. So it's difficult to find those trades folks. And in one of our episodes coming up, where we review the survey findings, 2 of my guests talk about the trades and how difficult it is. And again, as we just talked about relative to, black and white rules and not deviating from the rules, Also think that organizations, relative to finding talent and locating talent, they need to do things a little differently than they have in the past, because rolling out the help wanted doesn't mean you're going to fill roles. Why do you stay in your career? 79% mission passion. Wasn't really surprised by that one. You know, you talk to folks who work in this role, that's what you're going to hear. 50% said because they make a difference. This was one where you could do multiple replies. Only 42% said salary and benefits. 36% said stability of the work, and 7% down here said they feel stuck. That was an interesting one. I always like to assess if people think that they have options, you know, can they move on? And I always say, you know, if you're not feeling it where you are, if it's not a fit where you are, then don't feel stuck. Maybe you can make a change, or maybe you can make a change where you are. But mission and passion, pretty much 8 out of 10 of you put that as a reply. And again, that is not a surprise. I'm going to some of the responses, you know, why do you stay in your career? And it's all of, all of you talk about challenges and opportunities and the mission and the passion. And I think it's part of this reason. The salary issue, you stay, you know, you're probably aren't going to be at the top of the range, but you make a good living. It's stable, but purpose and belonging and passion. So many folks have replied that. And, you know, it's never the same day twice. So you get the mission, the passion, the variety. You use a variety of skills, and those are kind of the responses. Couple of folks, you know, currently seeking an escape from healthcare. The way I see the industry going, I don't feel that we're going to be supported as we need to be, given the demands that are coming down. But, you know, the enjoyability, as I, again, go through it, you know, some of the keyword relationships, passion, patience, calling. Didn't see a lot of COVID replies in this relative to the vaccine mandates and all. Occasionally it came through, but not a lot of comments relative to that. So hopefully that is a good thing. This was an interesting, to me, I've never heard this one before. And this must have been one of the people who was in that 7% of feeling stuck. Sort of stuck, since other industries do not like to hire from healthcare, since they consider healthcare wasteful in the facility area. I've never heard that before. And so if you've heard that before, contact me if you don't mind. I'd like to talk about that. I've always viewed healthcare facilities management and the folks who work in it kind of like, you know, you're at the highest level. It's almost like Major League Baseball in some ways. You got Major League Baseball's up here, the major leagues, and then underneath you got AAA, you got AA, you got single A. The reason I've consider healthcare as the major leagues is because you're dealing with all the compliance and the regulatory and the patients and the three, I was going to say 347 days. I think there are 365 days. So from my perspective, and also, you know, not from a biased one, but also I see it in recruiting, folks from other industries, academia, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, they come to get healthcare facility managers. That's why I said earlier in this presentation, the sharks are circling to get healthcare facilities management people. So that was an interesting perspective. I didn't see anybody else write that. Folks do not like to hire from healthcare. I've seen it occasionally with folks who work at the VA, that there can be some reticence on the part of an employer to hire from the VA because of the process and all, but that's about the only thing I've seen relative to a little unsure of hiring. And even from that perspective, that's why we talk about like black and white rules as opposed to being in the gray. I know lots of great people who have worked in the VA. Sometimes they don't want to leave because they've amassed a great retirement plan. nice vacation schedule. I had a gentleman ask me the other day at the Florida Healthcare Engineers. He was considering moving on, and he had asked the firm that he was interviewing with if they would honor his vacation. He was up to, what was it, 5 weeks or so, a pretty good amount, and then adding the PTO on top. And he wanted to carry his vacation with him, and he was like, do you think they'll do that for me? So I thought that was interesting. And as I said to him, again, I am fully, you got to ask. And if you don't ask, well, then you'll never get it. And maybe they do say no, but maybe they say yes because they can't attract somebody of your qualification. So gray, the theme of the survey should be gray, be comfortable in gray. So other reasons that people, I'm not going to, C-suite pressure is constant. I don't like it anymore. Retiring in 3 months. I hope you enjoy your retirement, and thank you for responding. A couple of people stay in it so that they can train the next generation of managers, and then they're out the door. Needed because there aren't enough young people entering healthcare facilities management related fields. I can't leave. So an interesting replies by all. So why do you stay in your career? Mission and passion, not a surprise. I always like to close with this particular slide as a history fan of history. I go back to, I don't go back to, it would make it seem like I was around then, but this is George Meade. Meade was the Union general, Battle of Gettysburg, Civil War, 1863. We've used this example before. Imagine, if you will, and indulge me just for a minute. So back in 1863, you have the Confederates moving north into the north. The Union is definitely on their heels. They've really yet to defeat Robert E. Lee. Lincoln, so it's a year before the election, but Lincoln isn't the Lincoln of today. He's on a little unsure footing, and you have the Confederate Army moving north. You're not really sure where they are. General Meade is not the head of the Union Army, but Lincoln fires the head of the Union Army. He puts Meade in charge. Meade gets woken up from a sleep and says, hey, you are in charge of all the Union armies. That's kind of like your director of facilities leaving the day before a Joint Commission survey or the day of a Joint Commission survey, and now it all falls on you. I always like that analogy. I don't know if it works. Granted, he's heading an army, you're doing a Joint Commission survey, but Joint Commission surveys are pretty darn important, aren't they? But anyways, Meade was convinced he was a failure. He wrote on his 30th birthday to his wife, I tremble sometimes when I think of what I might have been and remember what I am when I reflect on what I might have accomplished. I'm sure lots of folks, I shouldn't say I'm sure lots of folks, but I know people feel that. And so this is just something to say, and it's why I love history, because we can always go back and we review history and we could take lessons. As it says at the bottom, General Grant, Ulysses S. Grant was considered a similar failure. One of the interesting things, we did an episode on Veterans Day with Vince Patton of the United States Coast Guard. He was the head of all enlisted personnel, and that's a great episode. Vince is a very charismatic leader. But Vince, in talking about Grant, and I agree, Grant was a incredibly popular figure. It was like the Beatles, traveled the world and was incredibly popular. Today we're not really aware of that, but just what a figure he was. Anyways, tie it back to 2023. It is never too late. So if you feel you're stuck or any of those issues, you can always make a move. Whether it's another organization, whether it's another trades level, whatever it happens to be, it's never too late. And so with that, those are our survey results. I appreciate everybody who responded to that. We'll do it again in 2024, and I look forward to that. But as always, thank you so much for responding. And if you want to reach out to me, contact me on any of this, please do feel free. As I said, at the beginning of next year, we'll start to roll out some of the interviews we've done with people who are kind enough to say that we can interview them. So with that, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Peter Martin, Healthcare Facilities Network. Thanks for watching.